Hey everybody, before we start the show, I wanted to let you know that I have an original science fantasy role-playing game called Burn Bright that I published through Roll20 with Roll20. They're the publisher of this thing. I designed it with Jim McClure, Kat Cool, and Darcy Ross, and it is now available. It is super, super fun. We have a couple episodes in the back catalog that you can hear us talk about, or you can find out more at burnbright.com. That's Burnbright, BRYTE for bright.com. It is a labor of love. It is many, many years in the making, and I'm so glad it's finally here and I can finally talk about it. If you like me and you like my style and other things that I've done, you're really going to love Burn Bright. So go check it out, burnbright, BRYTE.com. This is Tabletop Babble. I'm James Introcaso. Today on the show, we are chatting with the one and only Mr. Alex Kammer. We have a lot to talk about. I interviewed Alex back in April, so our interview may seem a little dated, but a lot of the information is still really good, and we are still talking about some products that I think you will really love. The one thing is we do talk a lot about Gamehole Con, and Gamehole Con has been canceled, obviously, for this year. However, there will be future Gamehole Cons, and they're going to try some Gamehole Con online kind of stuff. So go check it out. And here is my interview with Alex. You are going to love it. Okay, everybody. Now I'm here with one of my favorite people, one of my favorite designers, Alex Kammer. Welcome back to Tabletop Babble. For people who don't know, who are you and what do you do in the world of tabletop games?
Well, first of all, thank you, James. It's always great to see you. It's awesome to hang out with you again. It's been too long. I am the director of a little convention out here in Madison, Wisconsin every fall called Gamehole Con. That is one thing I do. I have a small press imprint that I work with. We publish various 5e materials, and I also do some writing, freelance writing for a variety of publishers, including some of our friends over in Seattle. Lots of design work, and that is usually my stuff. I'm more of an adventure writer, so module adventures and also setting materials. I leave the real rule stuff to people who are smarter than me and more interested, like our friend Jeremy and so on.
Right.
That's not my jam. I like world building is really what I love to do.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you are amazing at it. I'm saying this because I can sort of see your background right now. You're also a collector of things D&D, which is where the Gamehole name comes from, right?
That's exactly right. I'm actually sitting physically in the Gamehole, and that is a space above a pub that I own, and this is where I house my collection, and I have a very large collection, let's just put it that way. And my claim to fame is that I have pretty much everything that TSR ever put out, and I have a complete collection of TSR materials in original shrink wrap. So I go back to the first print of Chainmail all the way forward to late 90s, about 97. So I've got a lot of stuff, and I'm surrounded by it. And so this is where we play. The Gamehole is where we game. In fact, after James and you and I speak, as I mentioned, I'm going to Zoom with my guys, and we're going to play D&D tonight. So you've been up here. This is where when we have friends come in for Gamehole Con, we always make sure everyone gets to come over here and hang out with us and have a meal in the pub below and check out the collection.
It's great. And it's, following you on Twitter is one of the great joys of life because you're always tweeting out the different products and talking about them like you are a curator. You have all of this great knowledge. I feel like you should be teaching a course at a university or something.
That would have been the most awesome course to ever take. Gosh, I would love that.
Absolutely.
Let's just review D&D products for a semester, huh? Well, I appreciate that. I do. I actually take that seriously. The stuff is getting pretty rare. I have some very ultra rare things. For example, I've got the original Forgotten Realms maps. The ones that Ed Greenwood drew in his home and sent to Jeff Grubb at TSR. I have those. It's a tremendous responsibility. We all love the Realms so much. In fact, part of what we're talking about tonight is a new Realms book that Ed Greenwood and I wrote. It's a big part of all of our lives. It's kind of an awesome responsibility. So I take it seriously, and it's preserved well and safe. And my hope is that someday we'll have a unifying museum of some sort that I can endow. I'm not naturally a hoarder. I love the stuff, and I've always loved this stuff. I'm not trying to, get the biggest collection and say, look at me. Or I just did this because I had the opportunity to get this stuff, and a lot of it was in marginal, kind of endangered spots, and so to get it properly preserved and stored was important to me. And I think someday we have so much momentum behind the hobby these days, which is so cool, that I think it's just a matter of time until we get a unifying, a real museum that wants a collection of all this stuff. And I that was really, really the original reason why I started trying to get an original set of everything in shrink wrap, not because I had some really crazy shrink wrap fetish, but I just wanted a perfect copy of everything. So then you could say, I have a complete set of everything that's perfect. And so we'll see. So I hope that happens someday.
Yeah, I sort of think of you like Indiana Jones in the sense of like that belongs in a museum. You know what I mean? That you're collecting to preserve the history of D&D, which is really very cool.
Point me to the museum, and that's where it'll go. You know, so I'm just waiting for the museum to be built.
Exactly. Yeah. If it were me, I would want to sort of do like they've done with Julia Child's kitchen in the Smithsonian, and just see if I could, take the whole game hole kind of and either recreate it or, give you enough money to rebuild your building and just cut it right out and put it in a museum because it is so cool.
That's hilarious. Well, the Museum of Lake Geneva is actually building an exhibit to Gary Gygax, which is pretty exciting. And I'm helping them with a couple aspects of it. They wanted I should have mentioned that I'm also one of the owners of True Dungeon. And that's part of the reason why they got me involved is the space allocation piece of a museum. Because, we're putting together this big interactive event at different conventions and different configurations. So they thought I might know something about space and how to use it. In addition to all the stuff I have in the game hole, which is the museum itself. But anyway, I'm going to be unloaning them my Greyhawk map. I've got a massive Greyhawk map that was done in the early 80s by a miniature company on canvas. So it's about a 10 by 8. It's a beautiful big old map that it was literally rotting in someone's garage. And I spent a lot of money with a conservation group out of Chicago who did a great job. They're the group that basically renovated the Sistine Chapel. And so they had some real chops, and they took this thing and they brightened the colors up and fixed it and patched it and preserved it and sealed it. So it's a beautiful big map. And it's a relic as well. And I'm going to endow that. And in fact, for people in the Seattle area in the Mopop Museum, if you go there, you'll see one of my brown boxes, and that's on loan there. So I take this seriously. If there are museums out there that want to display D&D stuff, this stuff is to be shared. I'm not a hoarder. I'm really not a hoarder, despite what it may look like on your screen, James.
No. Well, that's the thing. It's all cataloged. It's all organized. And you had said, right, that you want to talk about a product that you have created with Ed Greenwood, which I just think is amazing, right? That you're an adventure writer yourself, like you said, a world builder, but you're also like a steward of the realms and everything. And it's so cool to see you working with Ed on a product that is just awesome. So can you tell me a little bit about what you have created?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So I have to go back a little bit. As you probably know, James, that Adventure League has become such a big piece of the overall D&D brand, and rightly so. It's a wonderful opportunity for folks who don't have game groups to be able to drop into stores and conventions and play D&D. It's really a nice thing. It's good to see a strong organized play wing of D&D again. We sort of lagged there for a few years. And as Adventure League was taking off, and with my convention Gamehole Con, we have such a big Adventure League presence. In fact, we have the largest Adventure League hall in the world. As it stands, we have bigger than any other convention in the world. We have more tables. So Wizards, our friends at Wizards, reached out and were to myself and also our friend David Christ of Baldwin Games, who does a great job with Gen Con and Origins and Winter Fantasy. and said, you guys each can pick a piece of the realms, not in the Sword Coast and not in the Moonsay region, and you can develop it for your own. After some prodding, I'd like to think that they just came up with this round, but I said, hey, can we do some stories of our own somewhere else? Anyway, they came up with this compromise. So they allowed us to pick spots where our shows could have exclusive rights to develop and write stories. So as you know, Baldwin Games picked the Moonsay Isles and done a great job. They have a great setting book and tons of awesome adventures. They always have great authors to put to work on the material. So I have the advantage of Ed Greenwood being a personal friend of mine. He came to the show years ago, and we've just been buddies. He's just a good guy, and I've always enjoyed him. He's just so, he invented the Forgotten Realms before D&D was even invented. So he was writing stories in the setting. It's crazy, so he predates the hobby. But anyway, and he just is explosive with his love of the realms. I mean, it's just, you can ask him anything, anytime, and he just lays it on you. It's amazing. Well, anyway, so I asked him, I said, Ed, we have this opportunity. Where do you think we should set stories? So he came up with a list of 10 different spots in the realms, and they're all cool. And I said, well, how about you pick? I mean, where do you think would be the best, that you think would be really great for what we're talking about? Someplace that's really good for adventuring, that doesn't have a ton of lore, but some. And he says the Border Kingdoms. I've always wanted to finish my work in the Border Kingdoms. So I said, great. Let's go down. We're going south to the west of the Lake of Steam, on the cusp of the Shar. And so it's this temperate region that is a collection of principalities and baronies and holdings, and it's chaotic. There's no central leadership. It's said that if you want to, with a sword and a couple friends, you can establish your own kingdom. So it's got very topographically, it's varied. It's got great monster ecology and all that kind of stuff. It was just a great fertile ground for adventure writing. So we started writing stories, Adventure League modules, through the created content program for Border Kingdoms, and it's been very successful. So we thought, Baldwin put out this great book on the Moonsay Isles, and we should do the same. So we put out a very sort of slapdash quick PDF, which was just basically an amalgamation of Ed's lore, typeset it sort of in a Word document, and put it up as a PDF on the DMs Guild. And I was quite frankly surprised on how well it did. And shortly thereafter, the DMs Guild people contacted us and said, how about you do a proper POD project? Print on demand.
Oh, yes. Yes.
And so then I said, oh, well, okay. So now we're talking about a real project here. So I reached out to Wizard and said, look, I'm delighted that you allowed us to write this, to have this area and to write adventures. But if I'm going to make an investment in basically your IP, I hope that you'll help us do that. And to that end, can you get us a new map? And so they hired the wonderful and talented Mike Schley to draw a new Border Kingdom map for us, which we got. And then, then we set up to do actually build this book with more than just the lore. So we built 11 new character backgrounds for Adventure League, for any play, but they're AL legal. A bunch of different story hooks and all kinds of other great stuff for the set in the Border Kingdoms, and we put it together as hired a real layout person. Britt Martin did this tremendous cover. We filled it with art. We spent real money on it. This is like as if it's a real. I said, look, I want this to look like when it's printed in hardbound and it's on the shelf, I want it to be indistinguishable from a normal 5e release. It's going to pull out. It's going to feel the same. It's going to look the same art content, same style, everything. And it did. It's amazing. So I have a copy of the softbound. I'm just going to show you. I don't think you have video going for your show, but there it is.
Wow.
The Britt Martin cover, Mike Schley map, and it's been really well received. I was stunned. I'm a lawyer actually, so I'm busy. So I put the thing up finally, and a couple days later, I'm like, holy cow! Look at all those. How many books have sold? And it went gold in like 5 days, and now it's like 1,000 copies sold. It's crazy. So it's great, and I'm delighted and I'm humbled. I'm so happy for Ed that that people still want to see and read his stuff, and I'm just so pleased that people are delighted in pure setting books, because this is what this is. It's a setting book. It's not a module. It's not an adventure. It has lots of story seeds, And you could adventure in this book for years and years and years, but it's for, you know, a homebrewer who wants to do some cool stuff in the realms.
Yeah, it is really like soup to nuts. Everything about it is great. The art, the layout, the fact that it is like 127 pages, right? It's massive, a massive, massive book that you all have put together that I think really does stand toe to toe with anything Wizards of the Coast has put out. In a big, big bad way, and has all of these amazing adventure seeds and the map, right? So this map that Mike Schley made is incredible. It looks like exactly like the Forgotten Realms map that he made of the Sword Coast, right? Like it looks like you could take this map and put it next to it, and they are the same map, you know, obviously different locations, right? But the same style and everything, and just beautiful.
You've gone through this, I know, James, where you go through the ordering cartography, what that process looks like, right? So you start with, you know, you put together something as you kind of hand draw. And so what we did is we had an older version, I think it was from the third edition, that was the most recent map that Wizards had done on the Border Kingdoms. And so I said, Ed, can you take this and update it and, you know, plot in all the spots that we've talked about? And it was filled with little hamlets and stuff. I'm like, oh my God, someone is going to kill themselves when they try to draw this thing. Because it is so dense with these tiny little hamlets and crossings and stuff like that. And Mike did a great job. I've had a very nice conversation back and forth. Congratulate him. I thought you're going to hate us when you see this, man. But he did a great job, and it turned out wonderful. And I think it's a very cool map, and it's a great part if you like the realms, and you like the Sword Coast map that Mike did, and you like adventuring on the Sword Coast. I think you're going to really like this. And you know, Ed always jokes. You know, Wizards always wanted to do, or this is more TSR always wanted to do another Waterdeep project. And he said, yes, I think Waterdeep's a great thing. We should do another Waterdeep project. But what about all this other stuff? And so all this other parts of the realms there's so much out there that hasn't been developed yet, really. I mean, just the passing, and certainly not in our current edition.
Yeah, it's so very true, right? That we have, the realms are enormous, and there's a lot of fertile ground there for exploring other adventures. And I think the Border Kingdoms is a great place for adventure because it's kind of exactly what it sounds like when you hear the term Border Kingdoms. But there's also, like, in addition to these wild spaces, that there are all kinds of monsters and that sort of thing. There's also a lot of like politicking going on, right? Because it's the Wild West. And I think this supplement, you know, if you want to play a game where it's like, going around trying to take over, the Border Kingdoms is a great place to try to do it.
Yeah, and it's an ancient place, so lots of ruins. And you know, did this baron, you know, bury something somewhere and forgot about it? So there's all kinds of stuff all over the place, and strange little magic effect zones. And this is where Ed really opened the toy box when it came to the stuff that he tucked into all the lore here. The other piece of this is that it's officially sanctioned Wizards product. This is canon. So we had to go through, and as you, James, you've written a lot more for these folks than I have. It's rigorous, you know, the review process to make sure that it meets the standards and it's not game breaking and all that kind of stuff. So this book was thoroughly vetted, the 11 new backgrounds and all the lore, so that this is official D&D book. We just did it for them. That's, you can count on the lore in this book as enduring and as going forward in future editions. This is it. Which is great because they haven't done a lot of setting books in the realms recently. You know, some of the stuff that you've worked on, the Baldur's Gate. We've learned more about Baldur's Gate recently, which is great. But it's all just small pieces here and there. There hasn't been a setting book in a while. And I'm cautiously optimistic that they'll do another one at some point.
Yeah, I would love to see more of these, especially for all of the spots in the realms that we could use a great update for what's going on and adventure hooks and, just great story to go in there. When you were working on this book, how much of the stuff is new? Because I really do think before Gamehole Con took on the Border Kingdoms, there wasn't a ton of there, and what was there was like, well, this could all change at any moment because of the different factions that are vying for control here.
Sure. So this has been kind of a pet project of Ed's for years, going way back, to the Chewy days. So he was tucking little articles on the Border Kingdom in Polyhedron magazine, and going, so there, if you go to the archives, the Wizard archives, you can find about 2/3 of this. He was starting with at letter A, going through Z, working through the alphabet of every hamlet, town, river, and crossing and forest in the Border Kingdoms, and he got about 2/3 of the way through at the conclusion of 3.5. Most of that is on the Wizard's archive. You can find it. So we took that, and then I said, Ed, and he said, I would love to finish. I said, please do. And so he did. He went off and wrote the rest of it to finish all the way to letter Z. And then we had to put it together, and then actually properly proof it and properly edit it, and maybe put it in a more readable, in a more consumable style. Although these are all the lore is all still Ed's, and so there was not a cohesive, one stop spot for the Border Kings for this. So it's cool. I mean, James, we're the same this way. The fact that we can have any tiny little impact on this hobby is just tremendously humbling and tremendously gratifying, because I know you feel the same way about how much we love this hobby. So to have any impact, so some fan somewhere picks up this book and cracks a smile as they're reading it, my gosh, that makes me happy just to think about that.
It is super, super gratifying. This is one of those books that it's just fun to read, frankly, right? Like this is like you can sit back, read this for pleasure, and you'll get so many ideas for your games. And it's great, even if your game is not set in the Forgotten Realms, but has an area like this, right? Like I was reading this and I was like, oh, you could do this in Quabara in Eberron if you wanted to. There's probably all of these little places that are being settled and villages and things like that, right? And ancient ruins. And so I thought there was fun to be had there. I really want to talk about your cover art for this book. It is the coolest.
Well, the great Britt Martin did this, and he's a tremendous illustrator. Yeah, Britt did a great job. And so that's always when you're ordering art, that's always interesting, especially when you have a cover art. So what's it going to be? And so Ed came up with, wouldn't it be cool if? So we have adventurers, monsters confronting them, and a controlling sorcerer wizard in the back, because then it makes sense. Why are these monsters all working together? And gosh, Britt did a good job. I was blown away when I saw it. And I still am. I'm just delighted. I think it's very, very eye-catching when people see it.
Yeah, it really is. And it's one of these pieces of art that has like a lot of cool details in it that every time I look at it, I notice something different. Like obviously the first thing you notice is this giant manticore that looks very different. I feel like the manticore we have in the monster manual is like at rest, right? This is a manticore that is going to rip somebody's throat out, and it's great. But then okay, so there is a small-sized adventurer who is hiding behind a log on this cover, and it is one of the best little details that I've ever seen in a piece of art. It's just really, really well done.
That was Britt just riffing. That was not he just threw that, he put that in there, and it's so great. At first I didn't even see it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The first 4 times I looked at this, I was like, Manticore. Oh my gosh, look at the, and then the direwolf and the sorcerer, and like, what I wonder what spell that lady that sorceress is casting, and then what is that little guy doing back? Yeah, it's really detailed, and I love it. I think that's great. Layered art like that is really, really great.
Yeah, it's really just very good, and the art throughout this is just really wonderful art that has been put together, and like you said, the layout is really great and everything. So this is definitely one to check out. I am very glad to have my copy for sure. Hey everybody, just taking a quick break to remind you to check out an original science fantasy role-playing game that I led the design on. It's over at burnbright.com. It is completely integrated with Roll20. It is published by Roll20, and it is an amazing adventure that asks you to hope in the face of hopelessness, to dare to be kind when the only reason to do it is because it's the right thing to do. Trying to make this sound hardcore. Anyway, you should check it out. It's at burnbright.com. That's burn, B-U-R-N, bright, B-R-Y-T-E.com. That's bright, B-R-Y-T-E. So go check it out, burnbright.com. If you like the things that I've done, you're going to love this. Let's get back to the babble. I also want to talk to you about Gamehole Con. So for people who don't know, Gamehole Con is the best gaming convention there is. I am a big fan. I've only been once, but I'm going to come back every single year that I can because it is great. And so obviously right now dealing with an epidemic, and I know that you are taking some steps to make sure your convention is safe for everybody.
Yeah, we're trying. I mean, this is a very difficult time to be in any sort of hospitality. All the folks out there who maybe bartenders and wait tables and cook and or work in stadiums, and it's anywhere there's a concentration of people obviously is anathema to our ability to stop the spread of this virus, and that makes complete sense. So here we are in late April, and I have a show in November, and you think, oh, that's plenty of time, but I don't know. I don't know. So we're taking it, 1 week at a time. We keep watching the numbers. And so what we're doing, we're planning, a show like of our size, we're at 5,000 plus attendees now at this point. It's a year-round project. There are things that have to be done by certain dates or just you don't have a show. So we're hitting those markers. We're doing all the things we need to do. We're preparing to have a show. But we're trying to do it intelligently. So first of all, if we have a cancellation, we can just flip to the next year, and we have the stuff that we have done can carry over the next year. So what we're going to do is, and so we're constantly listening to our health professionals and public health professionals to hear what they have to say about this, and we're taking leadership and guidance from other larger productions like Disney and so on as to what they're going to do when they start to open, and try to take some cues from them. And I'm working with a group of other convention directors and owners, working with the folks from Luca, UK Games Expo, Gen Con, Gamma. We're on a group together. We get together every 2 weeks to talk on a Zoom just like this, to talk about where we are, what we're doing, and we're working on promulgating a set of uniform attendee safety standards. So things like taking temperature at the door, and we'll roll these out when we're ready. And the reason is that we want to do the best. Obviously, we're not going to have a show if it's dangerous. We're just not going to. It's just not going to happen. We're not going to take any risks. However, if public health professionals are telling us that we can, we're going to then have safety standards set up. And I don't know what that looks like yet because it's still too soon. Does that mean that everyone wears a mask? It could be. Does it mean, do we have to, we're already taking steps to spread out the eventually call for some tables. We're spacing tables more. We will space out things like will call and registration. That's actually pretty easy to handle. We can mark spots. We've been to the grocery store. We see those things on the floor about 6 feet. We can mark things off. We can keep people, we can attenuate lines more. We can do that. But the problem is at the end of the day, gaming is a social interaction does not lend itself to 6 feet distances. It just doesn't. You can't play D&D on a table with people 6 feet away from each other. It just doesn't work. So if there's strong social distancing guidelines in November, we just won't have the show. We can't. But we're operating under the assumption that the hope that we can. And so the other piece of this, James, that is going to be interesting, and I don't know the answer to this. And all of us, all the people that run GameCon have been talking about this. To what extent by this fall is there going to be an appetite for gamers to want to get together and game together? Are people going to just be too freaked out and not want to do it? Or given assurances like safety, assuming safety standards, assuming that public health says it's okay, despite all that, are people still going to want to gather? I've heard there are two very different camps that some people suggest, oh man, people are going to be so ready to get together and game again. They're going to come. Everyone's going to want to come. And others say, well, we're just going to stay at home. And that's perfectly reasonable too. So what we're taking the position that we're going to open badges in June, just like we normally do. We're going to sell badges, but we're going to sell them with a 100% refund guarantee or a credit if you want to carry over the next year. So you're not going to spend money on a badge for us. Same with our vendors. You're not going to spend money at our show and get stuck. A lot of shows had to cancel last second and they were in a position that they couldn't do that. Well, we can plan. So we're going to do that. And then you all out there are going to tell us if you want the show to happen this fall, buy a badge, and then we'll know. But if our badge sales are way down in the summer, we'll know that there's no appetite. We'll say, okay, we've made arrangements with our facility to let them know we're going to test the water and see if people want to come to the show. And understandably, if our sales are way down, that's okay. That's fine. We can roll this over to 2021. We have some dates in October already set. So I don't know, James. It's so strange. It's so strange. It's a big deal to put on a show like this, but to have this massive variable out there too, it's really odd.
There's no guarantee for anything right now, but it does sound like you all are approaching it intelligently. It's one of those things where it's, who knows, what is the right decision, right?
Yeah, we're going to do everything we can. For instance, Chew Dungeon is a very interactive event. It's very tactile. It's very, you're going through a dungeon with 10 fellow adventurers, interacting with NPCs and physical objects and puzzles that require physical manipulation. And, so we're going to set up more sanitization sweeps. We'll take a run off basically and sanitize everything. There's a lot of that stuff we can do. But at the end of the day, it's still a lot of people together. And it's, there's going to be several layers of go, no go. First of all, we'll have a governmental layer. If we're having anything that looks like a shelter in place or required social distancing, that's a, red light. And if the government says, state of Wisconsin, says that it's okay, but public health officials are saying it's not a good idea, we're not going to go. And then you all, if you tell us you're not going to buy it, you'll vote with your wallets, I guess, when you buy badges or not buy badges. That's a go, no to go. So there are a lot of people ask me all the time, is the game going to happen? I said, well, it could, but a lot of things have to line up, and and I really hope it does, because I'm so miss my gaming family that I normally see at these stops already. I've missed a bunch of shows. I'm invited to be a guest at about. We were going to chat at GaryCon, for example. And I'm so bummed we didn't get a chance to do that. This weekend, in fact, is a show out in Colorado I usually go to. There's one in Dallas coming up here in June that I'm not going to go to. Gamma Origins has already been moved. I've talked to those folks, and they're not optimistic that their October dates are still going to be valid. They're before us, so they're going to be a good trial balloon to see if they can go. Gen Con, I'm not going to, I do know things about Gen Con, and I'm not going to spoil it, but, be realistic with your expectations there. And UK Games Expo just canceled. They just announced their cancellation. So I'd love to have a show so we can see each other and play and get together, and that'd be great. And just like, oh my gosh, it's so nice to have this behind us, but I just don't know if it's going to be behind us by then. And realistically, we talk about a second wave that is of the virus that is very, very possible, and quite frankly, maybe even likely. How well do we do weathering that? A lot of variables, James. I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. Well, anyone who can hear this should go to GameholeCon in 2021. Hopefully, when all of this is done, if you're not comfortable going in 2020. But if you are comfortable going in 2020, buy a badge. That's the way that people are going to know.
I appreciate that. You're not going to, if you buy a badge, you are not going to get stuck with it. We'll pay you back. Or we'll carry it over the next year. That's we're not going to play any games with any of that. GameholeCon is a not-for-profit thing. We don't do it we've never made money. We never will make money. We do it just for fun, and that's why all the kind of goofy stuff happens there. We can give prizes away and cool swag, and we just want it to be a good time. We just want to have. It just brings us a lot of joy to see gamers having fun in our city.
This is one of the things I wanted to talk to you about with regard to writing, right? So you put out the Border Kingdoms guide with Ed. You are the author of Sea King's Malice, which people might know, a wonderful adventure. And you've worked on a bunch of stuff for D&D. You also have a day job. You have this collection of stuff. You're running a convention. I am interested to know, what is your writing process like? Because you're busy and you're also very prolific. And so what is your process like when you are creating, is it a sit down and do it? Do you ever get writer's block? What's your deal? How do you do it, Alex?
I get asked that I get asked a lot, do you sleep? And I do, occasionally, but It's kind of a sine curve. It comes when I have time. The thing is, when you're really busy, you don't have time for writer's block. You just don't, and this is the weirdest thing. I don't know if you have the same experience. So with COVID, everything's been blown up. I'm not going into the office nearly as much. As a lawyer, most of my cases have been stayed. I'm a personal injury lawyer. My clients are people that have been injured in various ways, and so their cases move forward when they receive treatment. The non-essential, non-emergent treatment is not. People aren't getting that, so everything's really slowed down for me professionally, which is fine. And my wife is a provider actually, so her life has gotten insanely busy. So I've been doing a lot of helping with my kids with their virtual education, schooling, and all that kind of stuff. But I have more time than I've had in years suddenly. And I find myself less productive with writing. I think I have all day. I could write, I could easily get 3,000 words done anytime today. And at the end of the day, I'm like, gosh, I didn't do anything. I find myself, watching the news more because this is all very troubling. I find myself, just thinking about what's going to happen. I grind, I masticate on this issue of Gamehole Con. Is it the right? Should we just stop it now? I have other businesses. I'm an interest in 2 restaurants. I'm a minority owner, and those are, of course, at a complete stop. And I worry about our staff and how we're, so it's been very strange to have time and not be as productive because normally, I'm so busy that I've got an hour here of my 12-year-old, my 8-year-old. They're busy right now. They're gonna leave me alone for a moment. I have my day job work done. I have all my other stuff done. I need to be productive right now, so I'm productive right there. I just get it done. But now it's just been. I've looked back over the last 60 days, and I have not been more productive than I have been throughout the rest of the year, which is insane given how much more time I have to do it. So I have a new appreciation for folks who are professional writers, and they get to a spot where they just don't, they just hit something, and they have a hard time moving a project forward. So I never really understood. I'm like, you have time, why don't you just work on your project, and just, if it's writer's block, just work around it and work on a different piece, like jump ahead a couple chapters and just come up with something, whatever. So normally, and this is, I'm working on a book right now that I'm really excited about with our friend Alan Patrick.
Ooh, I love Alan Patrick.
Yeah. So he and I are co-authoring this book, set in a setting called the Lost Lands, and it is it's a little corner of this area called the Haunted Steppes. So it's a grassland, sort of Mongol cultured area, but it's a lot of horror themes, a lot of weird stuff going on, and so we're doing all kinds of great stuff, like new playable races and backgrounds, in addition to a big adventure that Sea King's Malice I really enjoyed. I really enjoyed writing it, but it was quite linear. Those guys wanted me to write a 5e style, sort of along the lines of Storm King's Thunder, kind of, here's the adventure. And I did that, and it was fun. There's some real cool elements to it, but this is going to be much broader in terms of the turns that the players can make. And as you know, if you're going to write stuff that has more options in it, it's a lot more work. There's just a lot more stuff that you have to think about, because you can paint yourself into a corner often with your words. So Alan and I are working on this, and we're really got a lot of progress on it. But to answer your original question, is that there'll be a day when all of a sudden it hits me and I have time, and bang, I can just pump out a lot of really good prose very quickly, and then stuff will sit for a couple days. And that's always the deal I make with my publishers. You're working for the mothership, so they require you to have stuff on certain dates, right? I can't do that. I've talked to them several times and said, I can't commit to X words by X date. I know that sounds silly, but things come up in my professional life that take me away for weeks at a time. I just can't. And so the publishers I do work for understand that. So this book we're working on, and Alan's busy too. This is going to be a 2021 release. So we've got plenty of time to work our way through it. This is not like, hey, you got 3 months to write this book. So we're taking our time. And that's what my process is. And this is a new one. I love working collaboratively. Alan's such a good friend. I love the ability to do on this one, to say, here's this idea I have. I wrote a couple paragraphs on something. Can you read it for me and tell me what you think? And he comes back and has some suggestions to improve it. And we're doing this back and forth, and it's just great. I'm just having so much fun with this. but it's in fits and starts. He's got a very busy day job as well. He's got all his responsibilities for Adventure League as an admin, and he's got other writing projects he's on. So I'll get also this big blast of all kinds of stuff, and then he's quiet for 10 days, and and that's same with me. So it's we're not typical, I don't think. I think, I'm sure, James, you've got to get at it more consistently on probably a daily or weekly basis.
Yeah. So I'm the same way. I'm pretty busy. And so when I sit down to write, usually, right, it's the like, okay, I'm going to do this. And I didn't understand people who had writer's block before, because it was very much like, yeah, you put the words down on the page, even if you're not 100%, you put them down, and then you're going to go back and revise anyway. You'll hit it when you revise, right? But I think especially during the first weeks of quarantine, which like I work from home, right? Like it's not even that different for me in that sense. And I would come out of my office and my wife would come out of her office, and we'd look at each other and say like, I don't know what we did today. Like we didn't do anything today. And it is, sort of adjusting and the fear and the worry and all that kind of stuff. But I have to say, hearing that you and Alan Patrick are working together on something is possibly the most exciting RPG news I have heard in a long, long time. That is going to be really cool. So
that's very kind of you. Yeah, we're really excited about it. We're having a lot of fun. So it's interesting. We're wrapping our arms around some classic design challenges, and and since we have the time to do it. For example, I'll throw this out there: the having a product that's dynamic in that how it reacts to the player's actions, and that's hard. So let's take the classic example of B2, the Keep on the Borderland and the Caves of Chaos, right? When we all ran that as kids. You go in and you assault the hobgoblins, and you get beat up a little bit and you retreat. Well, what do the monsters do? Do they react? Well, there's no guidance, right? So the hobgoblins go tell the Minotaur, hey, these knuckleheads from town came and they sorted us out. Can you help? So we'd make this stuff up on the fly. We're trying to have some dynamic elements that way. For instance, how the material responds to the player's choices, and also how through time, the more time characters spend in certain areas, other effects happen. And one of those is we have this very evil force that's going to be affecting them, and they're not going to understand what it is. Call of Cthulhu has insanity, and madness has never really been handled in D&D very well. I think it's been kind of, every edition's taken had a little piece of it, but not really. So we're trying to come up with we call it corruption, and how this works with in relation to as you get closer in proximity to the source of it, and also through time. So we have these two axes, how they interact, and it's quite pretty challenging actually to make this work. And I hope we can. I mean, I may be talking writing bigger checks that I can deliver, but we're trying to we're working on it. It's pretty fun. So we hope we can have a product, a really great adventure with level 1 through 16, a big sweeping adventure with some new stuff in it that DMs can look at and GMs can look at and say, oh, that's pretty cool mechanically. I hope this. And so that's what we're gonna really take our time. And in fact, after we're done talking, I'm going to be playtesting a little piece tonight with my friends. Right? That's just really taking piece at a time and vetting it. And it's just a good piece of writing is a piece of metal, and you bang on it, and you heat it again, you twist it, and you bang on it, and then I unfortunately am not talented enough just to write and be print ready. It just doesn't work that way for me. I have to have drafts and tasks and then go back and get in there and rework it. That's the way it is for me.
Yeah, I don't know anybody who super writes that way, and if they do, it takes them a long time to write, because essentially they're writing and revising in their head as they go, right? And then everything, no matter how great a writer you are, a playtest, right, is crucial. So,
I mean, you can just see if you go back to old editions and look at stuff that wasn't playtested, say, yep, that's how you get to that kind of weird room that doesn't mean anything and doesn't have exits, and that's how it happens. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so true. It's so true. And it is one of the things that I think is fun, right? Is D&D is huge now, and Wizards of the Coast is this corporation that is attached to Hasbro, which is a big corporation, right? That I think we forget that some of the earliest D&D products, it's like, Yeah, Gary Gygax and his kids are the ones who did this, and and that Melf is Luke Gygax, right? Like all that kind of stuff is fascinating, and the history of it all being so small, and starting basically as a couple of dudes in a basement, right?
Right. Well, I was just talking literally last night, but I was on a Zoom doing a little interview with Ed, talking about the Border Kingdom book, and he was telling a story about being one of the play testers for Queen of the Demon Web Pits, and it was just like grab a couple staffers and kind of do it, and it was, and that is, that's always going to have a soft place in my heart, because I thought it was, the cover's like, oh my god, and reading it like, oh, but it's not a very well put together adventure. It just, even it just, so I've actually picked it up and run it as a part of the con circuit and redid it for 5e, and oof, I mean, it took a lot of work to hammer that thing into something that made a little more sense. But that's just, again, that was, as you pointed out, a very different era. They're just getting into press, and it's also different in a non-digital world. I mean, imagine what they're doing when they're having a typing pool, putting things into a mainframe to print. There's not a lot of going back at that point, right? If we can bang out. I'm sitting here on my Surface where I write all my books. It's wonderful things I can do with this. I can drop things in my Dropbox and pull it down and revise, and I can tinker to my heart's content. That just wasn't a reality 40 years ago. So yeah, I always try to remind myself of that when I'm reading something. I'm like, oh my god, why'd they print that? Oh right, yeah, sure.
Right. Yeah, the words were set, so they were doing it. It's, I think that a lot too about old rules, right? We like to make fun of things like THAC0, but no one had come up with the idea of a D20 system where you roll and you just beat armor class at that point, right? Like, so it's that kind of thing that it's like, oh yeah, this is, you're not just looking at words, you're looking at technology that just happens to be on a printed piece of paper. It's really cool. Dan Dillon said that to me. I was making fun of THAC0, and he said, yeah, but think about like before third edition, THAC0 was fine because we didn't know any other way, right? Like that was it.
Imagine thinking you thought up THAC0. We're like, wait a minute, I've got a new way to think of all this. That's a big eureka moment in the history of gaming. It's as unwieldy and kind of weird as we look at it now. And if you go back to before that, page 67 of the DM's guide, that's how much I played D&D, or where those tables were, and with declining armor classes. And as counterintuitive as we look at it now, at that time, they were saying, like, we have to come up with a numeric system to express the effectiveness of armor. Well, here we go. And why they went from 10 down, I never drilled down on that, but that's what they did. And now we look at it as silly, but at the time, like, it was absolutely revolutionary.
Yeah, it is a big thing now, right? But it does have these small beginnings. And in that sense, you also want to do right by the people who were there at the beginning. And that's why it's so cool you're working with Ed Greenwood.
Well, and I know you feel the same way. I know, we talked about this, James, about when you pick up, Descent, and you see your name in it and how much that means to you. I'm the same way. Having my name in a D&D book, I've accomplished some amazing things professionally, and in a lot of ways, but that is right there. I know that is in my list of accomplishments on my CV, of being able to go to a game store and see my name on a cover of a hardbound D&D book. Are you kidding me? I mean, it's amazing. So it's a legacy that I think we take, and that's why it's so great, because we take this all very seriously. This is very important to us, and that's why we try to do our best to put out great stories and great adventures.
Exactly. Yeah, definitely. Well, I think that is going to do it for this episode of Tabletop Babble. But before we go, Alex, where can people find you?
The best probably place is on Twitter. I think my current handle is GHC and Tacos. That stands for Game Con and Tacos. The tacos is a kind of a big thing for me. That's my favorite repast. And I'm, as James alluded to, I am doing a tour of every day. I make a post. I'm going through history of each and every D&D product that TSR ever released. And I'm showing my photos of my pieces of my collection. And we're in 1994 currently. And there's all kinds of weird stuff. It's a wonderful era of this, the splat era of just these products. Like they're just like, what the hell? Try it, print it, throw it out there. Don't buy it. Don't buy anything. And it's just so much, and some of it's so really weird. So anyway, if you want to check that out, if you're interested in the history of our hobby, you can see these things as I put them out. That's probably the best place.
Yeah, it is great, and I also enjoy your comments too about everything. Right, like you have no problem saying when something is not a great product.
Yeah, it's challenging under that character count, but I do. You know, some stuff is just not good, but some of it's brilliant, some of it's sublime, some of it is. You know, when I remember walking around Gen Con years ago. And they were launching Dark Sun. I'm like, oh, another setting. Ugh, come on, you got to be kidding me. How am I going to keep up? And now I look at this stuff like Dark Sun is amazing. I mean, what a cool setting. I can't believe I wasn't more excited about it then. But so that's what's cool about going back and looking at this stuff.
That's great. That's great. Well, thank you so much for joining me today on Tabletop Babble, Alex. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Well, that's going to do it for this episode of Tabletop Babble. People, remember to go to burnbright.com to check out some awesome science fantasy role-playing stuff that I designed. That's Bright, BRYTE.com. And also, just a reminder that Tabletop Babble will continue after episode 200, but not with me. 200 will be my last episode as Tabletop Babble's host. So I would love if you could head on over to iTunes, now called Apple Podcasts, and leave a 5-star review for this show. It would mean the world to the new hosts, Amber, Kenny, and John, who will be taking over on the Geekspective network starting in November. So go, head on over, leave a 5-star review, let people know what you love about the show, and let me hand off something really, really magical to the next people who are going to take care of this podcast. And I cannot wait to hear them as hosts. They are really smart, really awesome. You've heard Amber and Kenny on this podcast before, and you will hear John before we are done. So go, please leave a 5-star review. All right, people, you can find me on Twitter at James Introcaso, and you can check out my blog, worldbuilderblog.com, for all of the cool game design stuff that I am doing. This episode of Tabletop Babble was edited by Nate Pausenga. Tabletop Babble is a show on the Don't Split the Podcast Network. Thanks to Rudy Basso for founding it with me. Our theme music, which you're listening to right now, was provided by BattleBards. Don't forget, RPGs are amazing! Hey everybody, thanks for listening. I just wanted to let you know that this episode of Tabletop Babble was brought to you by Kobold Press and Deep Magic for 5th edition. Deep Magic is a book of more than 700 new and amazing spells, with spells for every single spellcasting class, which is most of them in 5th edition. Dozens of new subclasses and 16 divine domains, from beer to speed and beyond. Dark magic for villains, including blood magic, void magic, infernal magic, mythos magic, and more. Twists on familiar magic such as Fireball, Charm Person, and Raise Dead, plus dozens of new familiars and arcane servants. Find out more at koboldpress.com and tell them DSPN sent you.